You're listening to Sustainably Geeky, the podcast for everyday environmentalists.
Hi, you're listening to Sustainably Geeky, episode 77, and this is our first episode of the new year, 2025. So today we are going to be speaking about sustainability in the outdoor industry. Before we do that, I want to remind everyone that we are on Buy Me a Coffee. So if you are so inclined to support the show, you can go to buymeacoffee.com/sustainablygeeky and buy us a plant or become a monthly member. So now I am excited to introduce our guest, Annie Agle, Vice President of Sustainability and Impact at Cotopaxi. And we are, like I said, going to be talking about sustainability in the outdoor industry and the work that she's been doing to help the company become more sustainable. So Annie, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me here. It's an honor.
Yeah. First of all, can you just start by telling us a little bit about your background and how you came to work in this role?
Sure. I always say I sort of tripped and fell and aimed my fall into sustainability. I'm 36, so when I sort of started in the space, it wasn't really a space yet. When I went to school, there wasn't a sustainability major. You had sort of environmental science or sort of business. There wasn't really this space that we know as sustainability. So I actually started more out in the international development sector, which was a bit of a wild ride. I was working on everything from counterterrorism initiatives to women's rights at the height of the Afghanistan and Iraq interventions. I was spending quite a bit of time in the Middle East and in New York, and really started to see this interchange between sort of capitalism, mismanagement of capitalism, very irresponsible spending of resources, and a lot of these dynamics that were being mismanaged that also had climate components. So one example was we were doing some analysis work and recognized that ISIS didn't just grab the oil in the region when it came onto the scene, it grabbed all of the natural water of the entire Syrian basin. And that was a huge reason why it was able to be so strategically powerful under such a short window of time, sort of these weaponization of climate dynamics. And it really sort of made me think deeply about what my role was in kind of wanting to shape a more positive future and to live as responsibly as possible. And I, from there, sort of ended up in the impact investing space and then finally in the corporate social responsibility and sustainable consulting space, working with corporations. So I've had the chance to work with everything from very grassroots social enterprises to very large Fortune 500 companies before coming to Cotopaxi. And I'd grown up in Utah, spent a lot of times in the mountains. I'm a big climber and skier and hiker, and was keen on being in the outdoor industry just because there was such strong values alignment. And I was aware of this tiny company. It was a very small company at the time called Cotopaxi, and it was a benefit corporation, and had really been found as a vehicle to deliver economic equality. We know we are living in the most unequal times in terms of economic equality, and the premise of having an organization that was manufacturing as sustainable gear as possible to facilitate adventure travel. We're sort of in the outdoor space, but we're really an adventure travel company. And we really think that responsible travel, can be a really amazing way of understanding and expanding your horizons as a human. And 1% of our revenue has been going to fund our, hopefully what we consider to be a pretty effective foundation that has delivered economic assistance for over 4.3 million people who are trapped in cycles of poverty.
Wow, so a lot to unpack there. Sounds like you managed to kind of experience a lot of different things and figure out how you could be most effective in this area. So kudos to you for kind of making your way to sustainability in that way. And I think it's important, you pointed out that conflict, war, really affects the local environment of wherever it happens. And I think a lot of people, obviously there's a huge human cost, but there's also a big environmental cost. And it's important to remember that as well, because those impacts can last a really long time. So Yeah, the Cotopaxi website states that you all create responsibly made outdoor gear that brings performance, color, and joy to all and helps us build a movement to support communities around the world. And you kind of touched on that in your introduction. I love this idea that you're trying to bring joy to the world. And so can you talk about how you all do this, and I guess maybe why is how you're approaching your business model?
Yeah, I think there was a space for optimism and corporate optimism to lead this fight for conscious capitalism. And all obviously we breathe fairly rarefied air. We are peers with people like Patagonia, REI, North Face. I mean, these companies really did a lot to set the standard for responsible business practices. I think what really sets Cotopaxi apart is this idea of playfulness and of really wanting to put smiles on people's faces. I think you see our gear right away. When we first started with this very sort of bold color, which really came from using remnant fabric, right? So a lot of our products use what's called dead stock or excess fabric, right? We're sitting on enough produced fabric to clothe the next 9 generations of human. There's really no need to produce any new fabric. So a huge part of our sustainability journey has been to design from the excess waste that's already available. So our largest pack family, our largest single product family, the Del Dia line, uses excess fabric that sewers in the Philippines actually get to choose which colors and how to put them together. There's a sense of creativity and joyfulness that goes down into the supply chain. And those fabric bolts come from different companies who share that facility. So we really try to design from waste in all of our products. Now in 2024, we actually met what we referred to as our 3R goals, which is to have all principal fabrics and all products have at least one strong sustainability feature, whether it be a fair trade certification or an organic input or using dead stock, which was a really significant goal. So I think based on publicly available data, which is definitely not very complete, but it is there. We think we have the lowest carbon footprint per product in the industry, which is cool. And we really try to decouple ourselves from fossil fuels because we know that fashion increasingly through plastics and polyester is actually a significant source of profit for the fossil fuel industry. So we really are trying to meaningfully decouple our company as much as possible from fossil fuels. So that's kind of a bit about our sustainability journey and how we sort of think about playfully making products in a very different way that hopefully also becomes a case study for the wider fashion and apparel industry, not just sort of the kind-hearted and values consistent outdoor industry, but for the wider apparel sector of saying, hey, let's make less waste, let's generate less of it, let's use it, let's be more creative and playful about it. And that was kind of the genesis of these colors, because that's the kind of most excess fabric that was lying around happened to be sort of these vibrant colors. And we sort of love that. We like this idea that we're the anti-basic. There's a lot of very basic beige on beige companies out there. We really wanted to be the antithesis of that. You kind of know a Cotopaxi product when you see it. And there's something about it where you're like, yeah, this is sort of joyful. This is bold. This kind of is courageous to wear a color like this. And our products are really meant for functionality, right? This is not the kind of product to go be on a trend. It's really to live a meaningful life. And all of our sales are sort of directly impacting our philanthropy model, which is uses really rigorous methodology and a lot of resources to help place these very thoughtful bets in terms of how we can redistribute our wealth as a corporation to improve economic equality.
Yeah, you're right. I definitely know a Cotopaxi product when I see it because I've seen some really neat, colorful bags and gear recently, and I was like, man, I want to get that. If once my current one runs out, obviously I don't want to just go buy it because because it's pretty, but I want to get it when I'm ready for a new product, and that's it definitely does stand out. And I didn't realize the reason that you went for those colors was because it was kind of what was left over. So it's good to know. You mentioned a lot of companies that are also working in trying to be more sustainable, and I do think it's interesting that it's all mostly the outdoor apparel industry that's working for this. Usually, I mean, I'm sure there, as you said, are some regular apparel clothing companies doing some of the work, but by and large, you're trying to be a model for the entire apparel industry. So I think that's great. But what kind of work have you all done to collaborate with other companies to kind of make the industry standard higher overall?
I really give the Outdoor Industry Association a lot of credit. They're an example of how an industry association can work in ways that really benefit planet and society. So we are co-leading one effort with REI to help bring more renewable energies and renewable purchasing agreements to the Philippines. Our largest single supplier, Dong Yen, is located in Marvielas, Philippines. Really lovely supplier. I was just out there. We were judging their Christmas caroling competition. There's a lot of joy. It's a really lovely supplier. And we're trying to increase their use of renewables. There's already quite a few solar projects on the way, but really thinking meaningful also about clean heat. And so that's one initiative that we're doing with a lot of different brands. There are around 13 outdoor brands who are participating as part of that effort. So we know 97% of our emissions, like most companies, occur within our supply chain, where we manufacture items, which is East Asia, some in South America, some domestic, right? But we feel that we have a moral obligation to assist those suppliers and those communities of manufacturing, help them transition to a more sustainable future. We know that it's really global south that is bearing the brunt of the worst climate impacts and are experiencing a fraction of the funding we receive in global north for that transition. So we really see it as an opportunity as a company to co-invest a lot with a lot of peers, which makes it financially feasible for us as well as that supplier to facilitate those renewable transitions. The other effort we're a part of is, again, through the Outdoor Industry Association, working with our Tier 2 fabric providers. A lot of the emissions in the outdoor industry, because we have to use really high performance treated fabrics, so fabrics that have been treated for waterproofing, for high ripstop, they really need to perform so that they can be used as luggage, so that certain outdoor products go towards like climbing Everest. We have to have these sort of extreme functionality. So a lot of the treatment that occurs in Tier 2 at fabric production can have really high environmental impacts, high water usage, high chemical usage. So really working through a collaboration for a clean heat tool, which is really trying to eliminate coal-based boilers for heat-based products, which are necessary for treating fabrics, and really moving those towards steam, towards different alternatives, and creating actually a tool that would allow all of our Tier 2 factories to sort of figure out what transition makes the best sense, and for brands to then be able to co-invest with suppliers to facilitate those transitions over the course of the next 10 years. So those are a few examples. I think there are many more. There are a few around human rights, and really trying to eliminate some of these very predatory recruiting fees that a lot of workers are continuing to have to pay. So I think the future of sustainability and effective sustainability, things that really move the needle, is collaboration. And I think that the outdoor industry has been such a lovely industry to be in, because even though we compete at point of sale, all of the brands that we work with, we're very close with each other. I think we have a lot of respect for each other. We know that there's a lot of values consistency. I think when you spend time, meaningful time in the outdoor, it just makes you more thoughtful and more considerate about the impacts your company as well as your personal decisions have on the environment. And that consistency and sense of character is just something I really appreciate about the sector, and it makes collaboration and effective collaboration very easy.
Yeah, it does seem like you can't really be a true player in this space unless you have sustainability in mind. I mean, your business is literally the outdoors, so it stands to reason that you want the outdoors to be there and be available and healthy so that people can use your products to enjoy the outdoors. And I do love, that a lot of the companies that that are not only good quality, but end up being, have the sustainable mindset and really ethical practices. As a consumer, it makes me feel better to be consuming those products. So I think you may have kind of touched on this in your last question, but are there any other trends in sustainable product design and manufacturing that you want to talk about?
I think again, we're really trying to have upcycling and re-commerce and circularity become much more at scale as opposed to a one-off collection or, a field real sales. We're really investing meaningfully in increasing repairs, customer awareness of this, and customer idea of shared responsibility for products. Because we know a lot of the impacts of our products occur when they're washed, when they're used or not used. And so really providing customers with meaningful steps that they can take to care for their products, have them repaired, and then resell them, and hopefully also encourage the purchase of resold items instead of new items. And that's something we continue to lean into. We're not alone. I think there are a lot of brands looking at that, but that is something that I think is exciting to see that kind of proliferation of circularity and circular concepts throughout the industry. And that does seem to be picked up by more and more fashion brands as well, not just outdoor brands.
Yeah, well, that was actually my next question, is about a circular business model. So can you explain what that is and why it's so important, especially for this industry?
Yeah, I mean, we know, listen, fashion is a very wasteful industry. And the outdoor industry is somewhere in between fashion apparel and its own sort of thing. Um, but it's a hugely wasteful industry, and it's not as though we're talking about MRIs. The average American throws away 38 pounds of clothing a year. That's a shocking statistic, right? And there are these companies like Shein where they're making as many products in 10 days as Zara does in 1 year, right? The scale of these things, and we're not even talking fast fashion anymore, we're talking instant fashion. And these clothing items may only last 2 washes before they literally start to disintegrate on human bodies and into our water streams for plastics. We know that China increased their coal usage by 20% last year to fuel polyester consumption and demand for Shein and Temu. These companies don't clear customs. They use what is called the de minimis rule. So their products never clear customs. They don't pay taxes on it. It's a insane, it's a $100+ billion company that pays less than $1 million in American taxes, which is heinous. Because if you ship direct to customer, there's this rule called the de minimis rule, which allows those products to not clear customs. We know that these products literally contain lead. They contain puberty disrupting hormones that can increase breast cancer, that halt fertility, all kinds of different things. So the industry is really heading in this race to the bottom. And so, really thinking on the other side of that is, how do you counteract this ruinous usage of natural capital in the form of water, of polyester, of cotton, right? These huge fossil fuel supporting collections that are always running, always going. How do you counteract that? And the circular model, which was really obviously put forth by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, this idea that you use fewer resources and you keep them in circulation. And so Cotopaxi, along I think with the other outdoor industry brands, we really design for durability. That's one of a huge kind of pillars of circular thinking, particularly in the apparel space, is making sure that you're building products that last, that are strong enough, made well enough, that they can actually be repaired and sold and kept in circulation for decades, not for days, and last, as many washes as that customer needs, not just 2. And so, that's the first principle, is really designing products that last, making fewer products and keeping them in circulation longer, and then offering these sort of circular interventions that allow customers who want newness to be able to either repair their products so that they can keep using them, or return them so that they can be resold to another customer, and hopefully encourage that customer also buys secondhand, buys things that have been used by a previous person, thrift, shop vintage, this idea that you're generating less waste as a customer by purchasing fewer things. And that those items are kept in circulation, that they're donated responsibly or recycled responsibly. And so that's an idea that Cotopaxi is really leaning into. We have a fairly robust repair re-commerce program, and last year we launched our first fully upcycled program made out of previous Cotopaxi items. That's something we want to not just make off as a one-off collection, but really have that be a substantial part of our business going forward. And this idea that every Cotopaxi item that's out there, that there's a way for those products to find their way back to us so that we can responsibly reuse those materials, keep them in circulation longer, and make sure that they're being recycled or reused or destroyed at the highest possible value, that value is being maintained at the highest possible degree.
Yeah, really great initiatives. And as you said, a lot of outdoor companies seem to be catching on to this and doing these repair or buyback schemes. And again, buying used is always a great thing for anyone that's, whether it's outdoor stuff or things you use in your daily life. So this is really, I think, going to take a mind shift for a lot of companies in general, just companies, period. But it's going to be necessary if we really want to see meaningful change in emissions reduction in the future. So we've kind of touched on this as well, but what are some ways that companies can reduce their environmental impacts through their supply chains, which I think you mentioned was a fairly high percentage of emissions for most companies?
I mean, listen, I think it varies company to company. And I think responsible sourcing, but also responsible design is very important. So instead, challenging yourself as a company to use sustainable materials, whatever that looks like. I mean, showing a preference for natural fibers, which we can't always do in the outdoor industry because that doesn't make sense for us with what we need our fabrics to do in terms of performance, but really thinking critically about how and where you're sourcing items, what are the human rights conditions that are in those facilities, what's the chemistry. A huge part of the impact of the apparel industry is the chemistry that goes into our dyes. People should be very careful about things like odor suppressants or SPF treatments. All of those treatments are poorly understood and are largely supported with toxic chemistry. So really thinking about clean chemistry, sustainable dyeing processes, sustainable wet processes. But companies should really start by figuring out first, who are their biggest supplier partners, and making sure that instead of changing suppliers all the time, which some companies do, which makes no sense, actually really consolidating your business with a few trusted partners, and then really seeing those partners as full partners, not just as risk centers or maintaining this very Westernistic top-down approach where sort of suppliers are treated pretty poorly, and really understanding how their business model works, what are their margins, and helping them make transitions to renewables, to cleaner chemistry, working with people like BlueSign or ZDHC. These are sort of companies that help suppliers select and work with clean and understood chemistry, where you know the origin of the chemistry and it's understood to be non-toxic. So those are all recommendations I would make for companies, is to really spend a lot of meaningful time understanding your supply chain, understanding where your biggest impacts are and with partners, and then really working with their partners and investing, right? Putting money down as a brand to finance those transitions to solar photovoltaic, to battery storage, to clean heat, to clean chemistry, really thinking about those things. And also, to a certain extent, making sure that your business model there's not a ton of excess inventory, right? We really have an inventory management issue in the product and in the fashion space. We really overproduce. And so trying, to the extent that you can, of limiting production, of thinking about alternative ways of looking at things.
You mentioned money, and I feel like that is always the excuse that's given for why companies can't make these changes, right? It costs too much. I don't have the money, I don't have the resources, whatever. So what would you say to those companies? Because I feel like that's just the easy, I don't even need to try answer.
I think understanding that volatility and things like coal prices are eating away at your margins in ways that you're not even understanding, right? The fashion place lives, like the entire fashion marketplace lives and dies by margins. It's how much it costs to make your goods and how much you can sell them for. And margin is very volatile. And a huge reason for that is because of climate and energy disruptions across the supply chains. Like we know a lot of our suppliers, the price of coal can vary by 40% year over year, right? There's a huge issue with that. And if you're actually able to help a facility generate its own power, it actually will have a lot more financial stability. The financial stability of suppliers is a really important thing for companies to understand. Having margin stability through amortized investment in renewables makes good common business sense. And from a circularity model, purchasing inputs, material inputs, and labor once, and then being able to sell the product not once, but multiple times makes dead good business sense, right? We know that. There's a lot of money to be made by offering re-commerce, by investing in more durable materials that your customers can repair. There's also opportunity for new customer acquisition, particularly in the outdoor industry, right? It costs a lot of money to produce our products, and our products are therefore expensive. And so by offering re-commerce items, items that have been sold at a discount, also enables new customers who are of younger generations who don't have the purchasing power of older generations to engage and purchase your brand. So there's a lot of dead good business sense behind sustainable interventions and sustainable thinking. Sometimes, yeah, doing the right thing costs money. And I don't have a lot of sympathy for corporations who operate at the expense of environment and society and only benefit a very limited number of shareholders. And unfortunately, that is how a lot of capitalism works, and that excuse will be continued to be made, and I have no sympathy with it. I think it's absolutely unsustainable in every way.
Yeah, and simply passing on the cost to the consumer is not ethical or okay. In most cases they just say, oh well, we'll have to raise prices if we raise costs, and it's like, just make less money maybe for the top people at the top, like you said. Like,
yeah, it's also, I mean, who it really falls on is workers, right? Consumers are one thing, but it's really the workers and communities where these products are being made that are feeling the real impacts of capitalism, and who are the ones realizing our economies of scale and our quality of life in places like America, and have benefited very little from those economies of scales that they're realizing. And it's really unacceptable to me.
yeah, the older I get, the less I guess the more disenchanted I become with capitalism, the less faith I have in the system. But I am glad to know there are some companies out there trying to do good despite the system we're working with. And it's not just capitalism, it's just the way we've done it in America that's gotten out of control and become this, profit at any cost kind of system.
Well, I really think, I mean, I think about this a lot, but the terminology and legal language that is used in the C Corp and LLC documents really needs to be updated. This idea that the moral imperative of most companies, the legal and business imperative, is to generate wealth for your shareholders. We need to move to a business model that says that yes, you generate returns for shareholders, but that those returns cannot come at a net expense to the rest of society. You can't privatize profits and socialize impacts, right? A lot of people, Professor Ken Pucker at Tufts, have talked about this idea that the cost of capitalism is being socialized, right? All of the cost to the environment and everything, every single product that you have, those inputs came from our planet. The inputs came from the habitat. There's this sort of willful ignorance that these sort of products sort of come out of thin air. Like, voila, your new 14-step Korean skincare it got pulled out of the atmosphere, right? Like, it's like, poof, these things grow on trees. Like, no, every single one of those ingredients comes from planet Earth. They're processed, they're packaged, they're shipped to you. All of the inputs that we have, every product in our house, every appliance that we use, everything we pick up, every piece of clothing we wear, every shoe we put on, all of those things were generated using natural capital, inputs that come from the planet. And if we're taking more away from the planet than it can regenerate, right, that leaves us in a very precarious position as a species. And I think one task for sustainability professionals is actually making this more apparent to humans, because capitalism has done an amazing job obfuscating how it actually works, what its actual costs are, right? And I think there needs to be an appreciation for what the true costs of capitalism are, and ensuring that there's a much stronger sense of shared benefit for how business operates.
Yeah, people just take for granted that the planet and its resources will always be there and that they're unlimited. But
Correct.
it baffles me that people who were supposed to be looking out for the bottom line and profit just have no account for the fact that this isn't going to last. Like it seems like it would make more business sense for them to be conserving and trying to do the right thing by the environment, because like you said, it's not limitless. But instead, we just take as much as we can for as long as we can, and then I guess screw the rest of the planet and the future generations.
Correct.
Oh, well, you kind of talked about this briefly, but you all are a registered B Corp, and there are other, obviously, corporation models that are out there. Could you talk about what that means and how other companies can work to achieve that recognition?
Yeah. So there are sort of two ideas behind being a benefit corporation, sort of two separate pieces of it. One is the legal incorporation. So you can legally incorporate as a benefit corporation, which allows you as an organization to prioritize people and planet alongside profitability to your shareholders. So that's an alternative way to incorporate as a business, which Cotopaxi made that choice, which I recommend to any new business, any startup, any entrepreneurs out there. I recommend that you look at this alternative corporation idea of a benefit corporation. To sort of build on that, there's a third-party certification called B Corporation, and you can certify as a B Corporation, which does stand for benefit corporation, but this is a third-party certification that is contingent upon scoring at least 80 points on the B impact assessment, which really measures every aspect of your business, not just climate metrics, but things like what is your governance, what is your diversity of your board, what are your wages? Are you paying living wages to your lowest paid employees? Where are you sourcing? How do you think about that? What is your product design? How do you handle customer experience? Do you have a resale program? So it really measures all aspects of your company to sort of see if you are indeed having a net positive impact on society. And so no certification is perfect, and I believe really strongly that certifications are a means to an end, not an end in and of themselves. But I do think that B Corporation is arguably the most holistic and meaningful assessment a business can undertake to really understand what its impacts are and how to not just sort of achieve a certification and rest your laurels on that, but really to look at the things that this assessment has you measure and build on that so that you can improve across, employee treatment, your governance, your community engagement and philanthropy, so that you're in a state of constant improvement as a corporation and you continue to get better and better at delivering returns for people and planet.
Yes, it's good for folks maybe looking to start a business to know about as an option, I think, and also for consumers to look for or notice if they see it on a company's website or something. They can say, oh, I know that they've gone through this assessment and at least in some ways are thinking about these parameters. And if you have the choice between two businesses and one's a B Corp and one's not, I'd say probably go for the B Corp. Not that they're perfect, but it's a good measurement to start with. I know Cotopaxi has this mindset of giving back and entrepreneur or philanthropy. So what do you think is important for businesses in driving social change, or no matter what kind of business they have?
I think the first important step is to cause as little harm as possible. Acknowledge that as a corporation and as a human, you cause harm, right? You have a carbon footprint associated with your decisions. Every decision you have probably has an implication for society. And so I think the first role of sustainability, especially corporate sustainability, is to solve for your negative impacts. One, by understanding and measuring them to the extent that is necessary, and then really solving and taking responsibility for yourself. And then after that, seeing how you can build and make positive impacts elsewhere through corporate social responsibility, through corporate advocacy, I think is a huge under-tapped area. I think corporate advocacy and leadership, engagement on policy and regulation is really important. I mean, I think respectfully, our entire 1,000 tons of carbon at Cotopaxi, more or less, that's nothing. Right? Obviously, we're facing trillions of dollars of subsidies that have trillions of tons of carbon implication to that, right? And so I know that the biggest impact we can have is actually through policy and regulation. It's why we are so strong in our support of things like the New York Fashion Act, through extended producer responsibility legislation in states like Washington, Oregon, California, and Colorado. Regulation of corporations, particularly in the apparel space. Our space is just too unregulated. And so I think corporate advocacy is really, really important. Not just measuring and reporting. I think we can't report our way out of a climate crisis. We can't report our way out of a wealth and inequality crisis. We need to be thinking meaningfully about corporations acting more as citizens. So I think that those are sort of the steps that corporations need to think. Start with responsibility, then try to layer in positive impacts and use your corporate leadership to engage meaningfully around policy and regulation.
Well, Annie, we've talked about a lot today. Is there anything we haven't touched on that you want to talk about real quick before we move on?
I don't think so.
Okay, well, do you have resources that you'd share with our listeners who want to learn more about anything we've discussed, or maybe that inspired you to learn, or get into this space?
Sure. I'd say, there are some great programs out there. I personally went to the Cambridge Institute of Sustainable Leadership for my master's, but they also have a lot of great resources and learning programs for professionals. That's one area of resources I'd look at. I think you can always check out our website at cotopaxi.com. B Corporation and B Lab have great websites as well. And I think there are some phenomenal resources like yourself out there, podcasters, engaged citizens who provide a lot of up-to-date information and accountability of corporate action around sustainability topics.
Yeah, thank you so much. And we will link to all of that in our show notes for anyone looking for more information. I guess we'll move on now to our Green Life Hack portion of the show, where we share one thing that listeners can do to live more sustainably or maybe reduce their own impact. So Annie, would you like to start us out?
Sure. I'd say on topic for our industry, don't buy things you don't need. Don't buy clothes you don't need. Really try to purchase things that are going to last, that are a little bit more timeless, from companies that are B Corporation, that are taking responsibility seriously in terms of their corporate action and their corporate behavior. And I'd say in general too, wash things on cold. Everything should be washed on cold, and to the extent that you can, air dry everything.
Great hacks, and something I've had to do living over in Europe. Everybody air dries everything, so it's been something to get used to, but definitely better for my clothes. Well, my Green Life hack is also kind of on topic, and that's if you do find yourself in the outdoor space, whether it's hiking, traveling, whatever, just practice leave no trace principles. So don't leave your litter behind. Bring a bag or something with you to take it out. If you have a pet, pick up after your pet. Don't leave their litter behind either. And don't disturb the space that you're in, the natural space, if at all possible. You know, don't start fires in wilderness and move things around or pick things up. Just leave no trace, as if you were never there. Just leave your footprints, I guess is the saying. So that's my green life hack for those who are maybe either getting into the outdoor space or already out there and need a reminder. Well, Annie, one more time, can you tell us where we can find you and Cotopaxi online?
Sure, I'm on LinkedIn. That's my most active platform. I'm Annie Agel.
Okay. And it's cotopaxi.com is the website for the company? Okay, awesome. And you can find this show anywhere you listen to podcasts, on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. And of course, buymeacoffee.com, as we mentioned at the top of the show. Thank you all for listening, and have a great rest of your day.